The heavy trash can lid rattled as I dropped it back into place, the plastic snapping shut on the remnant of 2-day-old chocolate cake. I was wiping down the stainless steel counter when Captain Victoria stomped back into the station kitchen, her eyes immediately locking onto the empty cake tin. "Well, isn't that nice?" she spat, her voice tight and high. "The last slice is gone. I suppose someone's diet went out the window." My stomach instantly knotted. This wasn't a joke. The look on her face was pure, cold accusation. She stood arms crossed, forcing a hostile silence that made the air thick, until the youngest firefighter, Finn, shifted uncomfortably. "I threw it away, Captain," I said, my voice measured. "It had been out for 48 hours. Food safety protocol." Victoria didn't break eye contact. She didn't blink. "Right. You threw it away," she drawled, her tone dripping with sarcastic disbelief, as if I'd just admitted to eating classified documents. I felt a hot flash of pure, stupid fury. What the hell just happened to me? The immediate emotional reaction was absolute betrayal over something so stupid, so easily verifiable. I took a deliberate, slow breath and grabbed my utility towel, not giving her the argument she craved. I walked straight out to the truck bay to finish my gear check. That's when I heard her voice, sharp and ugly, coming from the shadowed stairwell landing. "That selfish woman just ate the last piece of cake, then had the audacity to lie to my face about food safety. The nerve of that firefighter. She is so unprofessional, I swear. I cannot handle her insubordination for one more day." My blood went cold. My name, my reputation was being tarnished over a piece of dried-out cake, being weaponized to an unseen listener. I stood there frozen, my hands trembling against the chrome of Engine 4. Hostile workplace, need psychological revenge. The phrase appeared in my mind like a neon sign, burning bright and unavoidable. My name is Tabitha Thorne, 42 years old, and a firefighter paramedic with 17 years of spotless service. I volunteered for this station, not because it was convenient, but because Captain Victoria was such an established, toxic problem that no one else would touch it. I went in with a savior complex, armed with experience, and offered to be her ally, convinced I could train her up. I was a professional. I was a team player. I was the person who always thought, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. That naive attitude was now dead, killed by a cake lie. I had credentials, commendations, and the respect of nearly every firefighter in the district. None of that mattered now. Victoria had just publicly labeled me a liar and a thief over dessert. Something inside me cracked, then hardened into something cold and focused. It all started 12 months ago. 4 experienced firefighters had already quit under her command. Victoria had been parachuted into the role, grossly incompetent, possessing the emotional maturity of a teenager, and most damningly, she had the fire chief's direct ear. My first week, I tried to coach her on reading a simple pre-incident plan. She shut down, staring at me with the pinched, injured look of a vulnerable narcissist. "Are you questioning my qualifications, Thorne?" she'd whispered, the air instantly turning venomous. I should have seen it then. The warning signs were everywhere. She took shortcuts on equipment checks. She gave confusing orders during drills. She threw tantrums when questioned. But I'd believed I could fix it. I'd believed professionalism and patience would win. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Now I was stuck under her command, watching good firefighters leave, watching standards slip, watching her poison everything she touched. The emotional stakes were high. I had tried the official route. I went to the union representative. I talked to the battalion chief. Every path led to a dead end. "We can't touch her, Tabitha," the battalion chief had admitted, rubbing his forehead. "She runs straight to the chief. Whatever she tells him, he believes. If you push, you become the problem." I realized I wasn't just dealing with a bad captain. I was dealing with a protected political liability. My career, my integrity, and my 17 years of dedication were on the line. The system wouldn't help me. The union was powerless. The chain of command was corrupted by her personal connection to the top. I was alone in this fight, and traditional methods had failed completely. If I wanted justice, I'd have to create it myself. The rules wouldn't save me. But maybe I could use them as a weapon instead. That night, after the cake incident, I couldn't sleep. Lying in the small, cramped bunk room, I saw the truth clearly. I couldn't beat her with honesty or protocol. She would weaponize my professionalism. I had to beat her with better professionalism. The impulse for petty revenge was there, but I crushed it. Impulse is weakness. I needed a plan that was legal, ethical, and so meticulous that it would look like I was her best, most compliant subordinate, while simultaneously building an unassailable case for her professional destruction. No vandalism. No gossip. No dramatic confrontations. Just cold, calculated documentation. Every mistake she made, every corner she cut, every procedure she violated, I would record it all. I would become her shadow, her mirror, reflecting back every flaw until the weight of evidence became impossible to ignore. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about survival and justice in equal measure. I bought a small, encrypted digital notebook the next morning. The first entry was the cake incident, logged with the time, date, my action, her accusation, and the overheard phone call. Every interaction would now be documented. I was no longer just a firefighter. I was an auditor, a recorder, a witness to her incompetence. I was building a history, not of her failure alone, but of her consistent pattern of unprofessionalism and procedural shortcuts, ensuring my side of the story was always backed by two elements: timestamp and context. Each entry was clinical, factual, stripped of emotion. May 3rd, 14:35 hours. Captain Victoria accused me of eating cake I had disposed of per food safety protocol. Overheard phone conversation at 14:48 hours containing false accusations of insubordination. I felt a strange calm settle over me as I typed. This was my weapon now. Truth, recorded and preserved. Let her lie. Add facts. My first action was the morning rig check. Victoria's checks were always a hasty pencil whipping of the checklist. Mine became an event. I spent 90 minutes on the small rescue vehicle, checking every bolt, expiry date and seal. I marked a single tiny tear on a canvas strap on the winch. I didn't fix it. I wrote a formal 2-page equipment deficiency report and emailed it directly to Victoria, carbon copying the fleet maintenance chief. I insisted on her signature before the report was submitted. The email sat in her inbox for 6 hours. I watched her open it during lunch, watched her face turn red as she read. She knew what I was doing. Making her accountable. Making her visible. She called me over, her voice low and controlled. "Tabitha, it's a strap. Just tape it and mark the form completed." I didn't budge. My response was calm, professional, and loud enough for others to hear. "Captain, the standard operating procedure states any equipment damage that compromises safety or functional integrity requires immediate formal reporting via equipment deficiency report prior to repair or replacement. The winch is critical equipment. I just need your signature confirming receipt." She glared at me, her jaw tight. For a moment I thought she might refuse. But she couldn't. Not in front of Finn and the other crew members who were now watching. She slammed her pen down and scribbled a signature across the bottom of the report. First piece of external evidence secured. I submitted the report through the proper channels, keeping a copy for myself. The maintenance chief would now have a record showing Victoria had been notified of equipment failure. If that winch failed on a call, the paper trail would lead directly to her signature. She understood this. I could see it in her eyes. The game had changed. I wasn't playing defense anymore. The next shift, Victoria gave a confusing, incorrect order during morning briefing on managing a structure fire's utility lockout. I knew it was wrong. A shortcut she liked to take that violated safety protocol. I waited for her to finish speaking. Then I raised my hand, my voice earnest and loud enough for everyone to hear. "Captain, just for clarity for the newer team members, you want us to bypass the 2-person safety verification on the gas line, correct? To save time." She visibly flinched. The room went silent. She couldn't admit to violating safety protocol publicly, but she couldn't correct herself without looking weak or incompetent. She was trapped by her own words, forced to choose between admitting error or endorsing danger. "No, Thorne, we follow protocol." "Always," she snapped, staring daggers at me. She was forced to look competent in front of witnesses, reversing her own faulty order. I nodded, thanked her for the clarification, and made a detailed note in my log. Victoria, realizing I was documenting her, changed tactics. She started giving me the silent treatment, then began telling others I was a stickler, difficult to work with and clearly just bitter. I didn't defend myself. I didn't need to. I responded to the silent treatment with professional emails. "Captain, confirming the status of the inventory report, as requested yesterday. Captain, awaiting your approval on the training schedule submitted Monday." Each email was polite, brief, and created a written record. She was forced to communicate professionally, or admit to ignoring a subordinate's legitimate requests. Her gossip didn't stick. The other firefighters saw what was happening. They saw me doing my job perfectly while she played games. They saw the emails pile up in her inbox, unanswered. Her silence became evidence of her incompetence, not mine. The documentation log grew thicker. I was building something undeniable, brick by brick, entry by entry. I used my 17 years of experience to design a new, complex training scenario involving a basement rescue, focusing on rope systems, a known weakness of Victoria's. I presented it to her as a team-building exercise, something to boost morale and sharpen skills. She had to sign off on the training plan to make it official. During the drill, Victoria was required to manage the overall incident from command position. She made 4 critical procedural errors in 15 minutes. Wrong anchor point selection, improper load calculations, inadequate communication with the entry team, failure to establish a backup safety line. Each mistake was visible, documented by the training observer, and potentially catastrophic in a real emergency. After the drill, I submitted a training feedback form, praising the team's effort and enthusiasm, but meticulously detailing the required areas for captain-level procedural review, all based on her errors. Her signature was already on the training plan. She couldn't deny participation or responsibility. The maintenance chief noticed the excessive equipment deficiency reports. The training chief noticed the detailed feedback forms. These reports, generated by my excessive professionalism, were landing on their desks, all signed off by Victoria. They weren't calling Victoria out directly. They were calling her in for meetings to clarify discrepancies between the sheer volume of problems I was documenting and her previously rosy station reports. The pressure began to build, and it was her own signature sealing every leak. Middle management started asking questions. Why were so many equipment issues suddenly appearing? Why was one firefighter submitting more compliance documentation than entire stations? Was there a systemic problem at Station 4? Victoria couldn't blame me without admitting she'd been ignoring problems for months. She couldn't silence me without looking like she was suppressing safety concerns. She was trapped in a cage built from her own negligence, and I held every key. The system was finally starting to turn. Victoria attempted to transfer me. She submitted a request citing personality conflicts and insubordination. I was called into the battalion chief's office 2 days later. He looked tired, older than I remembered. "Tabitha," she says, "you're being disruptive. Says you're creating problems where none exist." I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself with words. I simply handed him a small manila envelope containing copies of the last month's documentation log, all clean equipment deficiency reports, training forms, and professional emails showing my perfect compliance with every regulation and procedure. I looked him in the eye and said calmly, "Chief, I volunteer to transfer if needed, but I'll need to know which of these 48 compliance documents constitutes insubordination." He opened the envelope, scanned the contents, and his expression shifted. He saw the dates, the signatures, the carbon copies. He saw the pattern. The transfer request was quietly denied within the hour. Victoria had tried to remove me and failed. Now she looked weak. After the failed transfer attempt, Victoria's fear became visible. She stopped looking at me with cold malice and started looking at me with panic. She was withdrawn, tense, always watching me from the corner of her eye. I had completely neutralized her passive-aggressive tactics. If she said anything, I documented it. If she did nothing, the backlog of required compliance tasks, which I always initiated, piled up on her desk. The silence was now a tool for my advantage, not hers. Other crew members started coming to me with questions instead of her. They trusted my answers. They knew I followed procedure. They'd seen her fumble orders and cut corners while I maintained standards. The power dynamic had shifted without a single dramatic confrontation. I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't filed a formal complaint. I'd simply done my job better than she did hers, and made sure everyone could see the difference. Leadership isn't given, it's earned, and I was earning it daily. During a small car fire on Highway 9, Victoria insisted on a direct attack approach against standard operating procedure, a shortcut that risked a small-scale explosion from a hidden fuel cell rupture. I politely but firmly stopped the crew chief before he advanced. "Captain, before we commit, Standard Operating Procedure 14.2 requires a thermal scan and agent prep. I'm handling it now." I made the call over the radio, clearly and professionally, ensuring dispatch recorded it. The thermal scan revealed exactly what I'd suspected: superheated fuel vapors pooling under the vehicle's rear quarter panel. We mitigated the risk properly. No explosion. No injuries. Victoria didn't thank me. She glared at me from beside the command vehicle. Her face flushed with embarrassment. But the crew saw it. They saw her order nearly cause a preventable injury. They saw me follow procedure and save the situation. A subtle shift in team loyalty was cemented that day. I wasn't just documenting her failures anymore. I was preventing disasters she created. The union representative, having seen the quality of my documentation and realized my job security was bulletproof, finally decided to take interest. Not to fight Victoria directly, but to use my documentation strategy as a template for future complaints against her from other firefighters. "Tabitha, this log, this system you've built, it's brilliant. She can't fight facts. She can't spin this," he admitted during a private coffee meeting. "We've had 3 other firefighters come forward since your transfer request was denied. They've all started documenting too." I was no longer alone. My facts were now their foundation. The union had been powerless before because complaints were dismissed as personality conflicts or he said she said disputes. But documentation changed everything. Timestamps, signatures, witnesses, and procedures created an undeniable record. Victoria's protection from the fire chief was strong, but it wasn't infinite. Even political shields crack under enough factual pressure. The wall was starting to show cracks, and I could see light coming through. Just when it felt like the system was turning, the fire chief himself arrived for an unannounced station morale inspection. This was Victoria's Hail Mary play. She smiled, acted charming, and casually mentioned how I was the cause of all her station stress, how my excessive documentation was creating unnecessary work and harming team cohesion. The chief, believing her, gave me a stern, private warning about fitting into the culture and not being a troublemaker. The system wasn't ready to let her go. New tension gripped my chest. The final barrier had appeared, and it was higher than I'd anticipated. Walking back to the truck bay after that conversation, I felt the weight of the challenge. The chief's support meant traditional channels were permanently closed. Complaints would be ignored. Documentation would be dismissed as obsessive behavior. I needed something bigger, something the chief couldn't ignore or spin. I needed an irrefutable external catalyst. I needed to think bigger than internal politics. I went through the last 3 months of Victoria's signatures with surgical precision. I found what I was looking for buried in routine maintenance logs. A complex, obscure state regulation regarding the biannual inspection of a specific high-pressure pump system used for foam suppression. Victoria had pencil-whipped the inspection 3 times over 18 months and signed off each time as completed. But the physical inspection logs showed the system hadn't been touched in over a year. The pump seals, pressure valves, and flow meters all required hands-on inspection and calibration by a certified technician, documented with specific serial numbers and test results. None of that existed. She had falsified state-mandated safety inspection documents. This wasn't a workplace complaint anymore. This was a regulatory violation, a potential criminal offense. Falsifying state inspection records could result in termination, loss of certification, and even prosecution. This was the weapon I needed. But I had to deploy it carefully through the right channel at the right time. I didn't report it internally. Instead, I generated an anonymous email from a public library computer using a burner account that couldn't be traced back to me. The email went directly to the state fire marshal's office, not the fire chief's office. The message was brief and factual. There are rumors of non-compliance regarding high-pressure foam system inspections at Station 4. Recommend verification of biannual inspection documentation against physical system records. I let the external regulatory hammer fall. The state doesn't mess around with safety violations. They don't care about internal politics or who's friends with whom. They care about compliance, liability, and public safety. If the fire chief tried to protect Victoria from the state, he'd be risking his own career and the department's accreditation. This moved the battle onto ground where her connections meant nothing. I sent the email, cleared the browser history, and drove home. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for it to spring. The state fire marshal's inspection team arrived 2 days later, unannounced, for a surprise audit. I was washing the engine when 2 inspectors in official jackets walked through the bay doors. Victoria went pale, her confidence draining visibly. They went straight for the high-pressure pump system, clipboards ready, cameras out. Victoria scrambled, trying to appear cooperative while clearly panicking. They demanded the full, signed biannual inspection reports. She assured them the paperwork was current and complete. I remained perfectly calm, directing them to the filing cabinet where Victoria's signed forms were kept, each one clearly marking the inspection as completed and verified. My voice was helpful, professional, exactly what you'd expect from a competent firefighter assisting state officials. Victoria shot me a desperate look, but couldn't say anything without appearing obstructive. The inspectors pulled the files, compared them to the physical system, and their expressions hardened. The discrepancies were obvious. The serial numbers didn't match. The test results were impossible. The dates didn't align. Victoria had lied. Repeatedly. The marshal's team quickly discovered the physical system hadn't been properly inspected in over a year. The signatures were fabrications. Falsifying state inspection documents is a serious offense, far beyond a hostile workplace claim. It's a violation of public trust, a safety liability, and potential grounds for criminal charges. Victoria was pulled into a separate room for questioning. I stood in the bay, watching the engine gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, completely detached. I had done nothing illegal. I had simply directed state inspectors to official documents that Victoria herself had signed. She had created this mess through her own shortcuts, her own arrogance, her own refusal to do her job properly. I was just the person who made sure the truth finally saw daylight. The inspection continued for 3 more hours. They photographed everything. They seized documents. They interviewed crew members. The station felt like a crime scene. In a way it was. A crime of negligence, arrogance, and falsified records. The final call came 24 hours later. The entire shift was quiet, tense. The battalion chief walked in, his face grim. He didn't speak to Victoria. He spoke to us, the crew, standing in formation. Captain Victoria has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending a formal investigation by the State Fire Marshal's office. Effective immediately, she is not to enter this station or contact any personnel regarding ongoing operations. Victoria walked out 15 minutes later, escorted by a non-uniformed police officer, carrying a small cardboard box containing her personal items. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. Her face was hollow, her arrogance shattered completely. The The cake, the lie, the false accusations, they had all led to this moment. Her own shortcuts, her own negligence, her own falsified signatures had destroyed her. I hadn't spread rumors. I hadn't sabotaged equipment. I hadn't planted evidence. I had simply made sure the truth was visible to people who cared about it. Justice, it turned out, didn't require revenge. It just required patience and documentation. 2 weeks later, the union called with news. Victoria was terminated, losing not just her job but also the retirement benefits tied to her years of service. The state investigation revealed a pattern of falsified inspections spanning 3 years. She would never work as a firefighter again. Her certifications were revoked. A week after that, I got a call from the deputy chief. They needed an interim battalion chief, someone who understands compliance and system integrity, someone the crews respect. They offered me the position. Accepted. I didn't just survive the hostile environment. I rose above it, taking a position of authority that could have protected her if she deserved it. The promotion felt surreal. I'd gone from being accused of stealing cake to being trusted with an entire battalion. But it made sense. I'd proven myself through the hardest test possible, maintaining integrity under pressure, following procedure when it was easier to cut corners, and standing firm when the system tried to crush me. That's what real leadership looks like. I packed my locker at Station 4 for the last time. As I turned to leave, I saw the empty space where Victoria's plaque used to hang. I didn't feel rage or joy. I felt a quiet, profound sense of peace. I had sought revenge, but I found something better: vindication. My greatest act of psychological warfare wasn't a trick or manipulation. It was choosing impeccable integrity and patience over cheap theatrics. When they try to crush you, don't fight fire with fire. Fight fire with documentation, procedure, and a spine made of steel. Know your worth. Secure your records. Let your enemy's own arrogance be the fire that consumes them. I walked out of Station 4, not as a victim, but as a battalion chief. The cake incident seemed like ancient history now, a small spark that had ignited something much larger. Victoria had tried to destroy my reputation over nothing. Instead, she'd revealed her own failures to everyone who mattered. I never heard her name again. And that, more than any revenge, was exactly what I needed.